Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria, where we help entrepreneurs dream with intention, build with strategy, and grow profitably. Today, I'm thrilled to have Frances Leary on the show. Frances is a Texan-Canadian entrepreneur, a writer, speaker, online strategist, and storyteller who uses the internet to tell her clients stories. After earning an MA in folklore and studying how cultures tell their stories and market them for profit, she began working as an online strategist in 2007. She officially opened the doors to the Halifax-based online marketing firm Wired Flair in 2011. The folks at Wired Flair work with businesses, including many franchises, from all over the world to help them achieve their goals using targeted online content marketing and social media strategies. Hello, Frances, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Josh. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
Well, absolutely. So, I love that you are a Texan-Canadian entrepreneur. And I really can't wait to dive into your story. I think it's fascinating. But first, take a couple minutes. Tell us about you, how you went from Texas to Canada, and how you got interested in online strategy businesses.
Sure. It's one of those stories where if I look back, 15 years ago, I don't think I ever would have anticipated that I would be here today. And yet it's absolutely the perfect fit and absolutely where I want to be. I love it. I was a school teacher for 10 years in Texas. And using a lot of folklore strategies and teaching a lot of folklore in my classroom. And it got to the point where I wanted to do something else. I knew I wanted to go to school. And folklore just kind of kept calling to me. Folklore is a lot more than people think. It's really the study of how cultures communicate their belief systems in a lot of different ways. Whether it's through song or music or dance or visual arts or storytelling. And so I found the absolute perfect school for me, which was in Newfoundland, in St. John's at the Memorial University there. And, there were schools in Austin and Indiana and Pennsylvania, and I was in Houston, Texas at the time, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can go to any of these places that I've been and visited before, but to get to go to Newfoundland, how exciting. So I jumped at the opportunity and went there for my master's degree. And in that process, my thesis was on this Bigfoot creature that lives in the Louisiana-Mississippi swamps called the Honey Island Swamp Monster. And what I did was I traveled down and I spent time there near the swamps anyway, going on swamp tours and talking to these people that have seen this creature and told their stories about it, and then started really investigating how the communities started to sell these stories in different ways to commodify it to make money. So from plaster footprints to t-shirts to cookbooks to the swamp tours and other books, videos even about it. And it was really interesting. At the time, I didn't know that it would lead me to where I am today, but it was an incredible introduction into the field of marketing. And I also met my future husband in Newfoundland. And we then moved back to Mississippi, or to Winnipeg first, then to Mississippi, and finally made our way back up to Halifax. And it was at that time that I started working in the online world, pretty much by force, really. I didn't have another opportunity. I couldn't actually work in Canada in another way. So I just started learning, how do you use the internet to do this sort of marketing thing? And I was working with a health and wellness company at the time. And I did that for a couple years and loved it, got really good at it. And people in my community, other business people, started sort of asking, well, how are you using the internet to do what you're doing? And so I saw an opportunity. And I started just on my own, sort of training other business people and doing consultations. And then I jumped at the chance. So within a couple months, I started the company. I had other people working with me, and we evolved into delivering services for our clients and handling it for them instead of just training them to do so. And now I realize that my background in folklore, in that storytelling, gives me such sort of a richness to rely on, a real root, I guess, in marketing, because marketing is communicating your story, my clients' stories, to their audiences in a way that's really meaningful, it just really resonates with them. And without the background in folklore, I'm sure I could have gotten there, but it's just given me a bit of an edge and a new way of looking at things.
Well, I can just see the headline right now, Frances, from swamp monsters to online strategies.
Yeah.
How to differentiate your business.
Yeah, nobody else has taken this route to get where I am today. So.
Well, here's the thing, though. I as you tell the story, I'm saying to myself, oh, wow, you've got sort of the perfect recipe there, because as you mentioned, storytelling is huge. Everybody's trying to tell their story, and everybody's trying to get noticed in this noisy world, online and offline. But two big components of being great online is storytelling, as you mentioned, and teaching, which you've got a background as a school teacher. So it almost seems perfectly fitting for what you're doing right now. I had the opportunity to interview Marcus Sheridan. I don't know if you know of him from the sales line. He's an online marketing guy doing great stuff. He was talking about how everything is all about teaching now. You're teaching online. You're teaching, and utilizing storytelling and the teaching is just a great way for businesses to really market themselves. And I mean, how do you, though? Because you said you take on. You're essentially doing it for the clients, right? You're not providing them with the plan and they implement it. You're actually doing it for them. Is that right?
In most cases, we do have clients that they've got a great in-house team built already, and they simply need someone to come in and help them build the foundational resources and then train their team to implement it. So we do that as well. Most of our clients, however, hire us to actually go in, build all those components, but then implement it with them.
So what's that process like? So take us through that process when you work with the business in getting to a point where you understand their vantage point, you understand their story, because you have to first understand it before you can tell it, I would think, effectively.
Absolutely. It is definitely a process. It doesn't happen overnight. There are a lot of conversations, a lot of going back and forth. We really are the client. Our team is the client's team. We're not a separate entity that's creating content for them, or we become their voice. And the only way we do that is because we can really work closely with them. So, it begins with a very deep conversation about the vision for how they want to communicate with their audience and what does that look like for all of their team. So for a franchise, you've got to consider, there's the franchisor and their goals and what do they want their brand to look like online? What do they want their audience to be talking about? And then how do they want to support the franchisees in that endeavor? And what about the other staff that also works directly for the franchisor and for the franchisee? So they really have a lot to consider. So we go in and help them sort of break through that noise and dig deep to find out what their goal really is and what's the best model to put in place for everyone that will benefit everyone. So that will benefit the franchisor and the franchisees and help everyone succeed. So that's sort of step one, really defining what is this going to look like for everybody and who's responsible for what. I think there was just a recent discussion I was in on LinkedIn about this debate in franchises about who pays for things. Well, I think when you really dig down and have a conversation that involves franchisor and franchisees, and you have everybody working together, it's not as complex as it has to be to find a solution that really works for everyone.
Well, and it should be both parties working together.
Mm-hmm.
I get so frustrated when I hear, so often the conversation is about the franchisor versus the franchisee. And, the best systems, both are playing on the same team. I mean, they obviously
Absolutely.
have some different interests, but they're united by one central interest, and that is the promotion of their brand. I'm curious, are you having more success, or are you dealing more with people on the franchisee side, or are you going through the franchisor, and then by virtue of going through the franchisor, getting connected with a lot of the franchisees?
So almost always we work directly with the franchisor, and then through the franchisor directly with the franchisees. So typically our initial client, though, is the franchisor, and we deal or we communicate with them usually with franchisee input to create these foundational elements that will then guide the rest of the online communication plan. And often then, well, actually, I think in every case, we also work directly with the franchisees. So we communicate with them, they communicate with us. We help get their individual messages out as well as the franchisor sort of larger message.
So after you form those foundational elements, and after you've sort of you understand the story, then is it a matter of just trying a lot of different things? I mean, telling the story different ways and testing it, maybe A/B testing, split testing, doing all those kinds of things to see what works, what sticks?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we do a lot of research, competition research, of course, and we look at what the organization has been already doing and seeing what's working and what isn't. There's no tried and true, this always works in social communication. It's not. And even if you've got a company that's in a similar industry's audience are slightly different, and you've got the opportunity to engage them in unique ways. So we create a whole lot of different types of content working with the franchisors and the franchisees. And we really capture that voice, and then we start the process of kind of getting it out there and seeing what works, and what times of day does it work best, and what types of media does the audience respond to best. What gets the conversation really started? Because I mean, the story only goes so far if no one's hearing it and no one's interacting with it. So you've got to really use the story of the organization to then prompt that conversation and get people excited.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's all, I mean, they have to be excited. There has to be sort of that theme that you're building around. I mean, are you finding that when you're working with the franchisors, because a lot of them have their own marketing departments, or they outsource their marketing, and maybe they're used to doing more traditional direct marketing, direct mailers. Are you finding yourself having to work within that realm, maybe be a complement to the direct mail? Or are you seeing that they're now making a switch over to more of the content marketing online, or a combination of the two?
I'd say that we're seeing a combination. Some of our, the new clients that we've brought on board are so eager. They absolutely know this is where they need to be, and they're giving this more emphasis than some of the more traditional methods. The organizations, though, that have been around a long time have really tried and true success with the other methods. It's a little bit harder for them to see the relevance, even though they can see sort of numbers dropping from the results generated by traditional marketing methods. So it's really more of a mix. Then we go in, we work with the current marketing department, we use content that complements the content that's being distributed in other ways, so that it really is an all-over holistic approach to spreading that message.
Now, do you find that there's a difference in marketing for business to consumer businesses versus business to businesses? That's, if that makes sense. B2B.
Yes.
Yeah.
There definitely is. I mean, I'd say our process is the same initially. It's the content, and then it's the platforms that really are different. I've never bought into the generalizations that say, if you market to consumers, you need to be on Facebook, and if you market to businesses, you need to be on Twitter or LinkedIn. It's not as simple as that. It's really identifying where the audience is, and then engaging in such a way that the audience will engage back. So we spend a lot of time really doing that research in advance, and then testing. And sometimes we test it and we find, that didn't work, so we've got to try a new strategy. But It's really more about it. Sometimes when you're dealing with business to business, you have to work just a little bit harder to get people really, really excited about it on social platforms. Because whereas the consumer audience is there, they're ready to talk about the products that they love. The business audience is, they're down to business. How can we engage them in such a way that's beneficial to them, that informs them, will help support them in what they're doing, while we're building relationships with them?
Do you believe that in online strategies, obviously for all businesses, but I find that there's a lot of businesses out there that erroneously think that it only works well for B2C type businesses. So how do you effectively go in and tell the story? I mean, I know it's more difficult, but are you looking for things where you can then ultimately relate it to a consumer or relate it to their interests, or how do you find that sweet spot?
Right. Well, it definitely is just as important for B2B businesses to be online as it is for B2C businesses. And more organizations are out there searching online for the potential partners, suppliers. They're doing their online research before they decide who they're going to work with. So it's really important to be there. But how do you do it? It varies so differently. In some cases, you can create some kind of personality out of a product that they're creating. You can give the brand some type of character and play that up. In some cases, you work very highly with LinkedIn, and the strategy is more that you use individual business accounts who are, say, part of the leadership team at the organization, versus communicating from a corporate perspective. There are really just so many ways that there isn't one way that works for every company. Twitter is certainly a place that we look at in every case to see how this will be beneficial. Almost often it is, because you can build lists, you can specifically target other businesses that could be partners that you could supply for and all of that. You can seek them out, you can start engaging proactively with them as they see your benefit to them in a social setting, then you become more valuable.
Well, and the thing is, I found too, and I mean, this is just a personal example for me, with what I do in my legal practice and businesses. At first I thought LinkedIn would be fantastic, would be sort of the go-to. And I found better success for myself through Facebook and Twitter. And I'm not sure if it's because it's easier to engage and have a conversation on those sites, or what the difference is. But I've sort of focused more on Facebook and Twitter and less on the others. And I'm wondering, is that a mistake? I mean, do you subscribe to the be everywhere kind of philosophy?
No, I don't. I do not subscribe to that. I think that organizations that try to do that sometimes just end up so overwhelmed. They think they have to be everywhere, and then they don't do anything really successfully, and nothing is of benefit to them. So especially if organizations are just starting out really with their online strategy, just pick one, and be there and give that a go. But answer some simple questions first. Like, number one, is your audience there? If they're not, well, that's not the choice that you should make. Number two, is your competition there? Number three, are people there talking about your industry or engaging with businesses that are in your industry? And if you can answer yes to those three questions, then it's pretty safe to go ahead, choose that platform, and just move forward, right, with your strategy. And then as you get comfortable with that, you can branch out and try something else. Like typically with our clients, because they have us on their side and working with them, we tackle more than one social platform at once. However, if you're starting out on your own and it's overwhelming, just, do one.
Well, do you find yourself sometimes having to help your clients realize what their true audience is? In other words, I imagine you probably work with some businesses where they think their audience is one thing and then is you, but they've never really done the work to figure it out. As amazing as that sounds, I think there's a lot of businesses out there that just kind of go whichever way the wind blows them. So I'm curious if you end up doing that. Yeah.
It is. And also, I mean, online, you can build a lot of relationships with people and with organizations that may not be the ultimate end client. However, with building relationships with those people and organizations, you can reach far more members of your audience, and you can have a lot more impact that way. So sometimes the strategy is not to communicate directly with the end user right away. It's to build relationships with others that can get you in front of that end user more quickly.
I think that's a huge point. I really am glad you said that, because I think that people always want to get to that end consumer so quickly. I can't tell you the number. Well, I can tell you this. The real big difference I started noticing in things I was doing was when I just stopped actually thinking about trying to drive business and thought more about just engage with people, just have conversations. I mean, I can't. I've gotten so many different referrals just because I've gotten to know people, and I really have never even had a conversation with them about anything business related. And I think it goes to that old adage. It's like any kind of I guess old school networking and marketing. When you meet with people, I mean, you're not just, when you meet with somebody, cramming down everything about your business and trying to, I mean, it'd be like,
that's right.
It'd be like me meeting somebody for the first time and just telling them all about my products and I want them to buy. And I think a lot of people do that online, and they don't take the time to realize that it's a conversation, just like if you're having a conversation in person with somebody.
That's right. And I think sometimes what's lost is that at the very core of almost every business out there is a vision that goes beyond the sale, right? It's about benefiting the audience in some way. Your business is fulfilling a need, solving a problem. And so our goal is to help our clients really communicate that. So how can you serve your audience in a greater way, knowing that as you help them, as you benefit them, as they grow, then you're going to benefit in return. And so we always approach our content marketing from the perspective of what can we write, what can we create and put out there that's going to have a benefit to the audience, to really build that relationship.
What's a time frame that you typically work with your clients, or when you're talking to a potential client, what kind of time frame do you give them to where you can really start seeing an appreciable difference in their online strategy and effectiveness?
Well, I think within a few months, you can really start to see engagement increasing. Absolutely. Like if we're starting with a client from fresh, and they don't have an online strategy in place, then the first month or so is simply laying down that foundation, probably cleaning up a little bit of mess that might be out there. Maybe the brand isn't represented quite right. Images need to be changed. Spaces need to be claimed, maybe that aren't, things like that. That usually takes a month or so, and then we'll get into the actual content marketing strategy and the engagement. And I'd say, within that first month, you can really start to see some audience excitement, which is great. Because when we can show our clients like, oh, wow, I see this is starting to work. It's great. When it sits around for 6 months and nothing's happening, it gets really discouraging. So I think it's important to have content that you're keeping a close eye on all the time, so that you're monitoring, what's going on, what are people saying, how are they responding to this? And if the first week you've got nothing, well, you need to change something. So you're always adapting. But for it to start translating into sale, I think what organizations have to understand is that social communication is a long-term, ongoing process. It's not an advertisement that you place that converts into sales the next day. And if you're in it for that, then there are probably better places for you to spend your time and your money, really. It's more of a long-term relationship that you're building up with your audience. And as that does start to happen, though, the calls start to come in, the links back to the website start to happen. Typically, links back will happen first, and then the calls will come a little bit later. And it really varies based on the product or service as to when you actually start to see those sales starting to come in from social communication. But we're on the line of 6 months to a year rather than 1 month, and certainly not a day.
Do you find that franchisors are starting to come around a bit in terms of this. It seems to me that there's probably, even though you're telling the same story, there's probably a difference or a distinction between online strategies for the franchisor who's thinking about the global system versus the franchisee who's thinking about their localized area. And I know, with Google and with a lot of online, everything is hyper localized, which is great. And so are you finding that the franchise systems that you're working with are better understanding this? Because, gosh, in my experience, it's sort of like that they're missing the boat on that. I think some of them are just saying, oh, well, franchisee, just go do what you want. And I'm going, no, you guys are, first of all, that's risky for your brand. But second of all, you're missing the boat. You're missing an opportunity to show some greater support for your franchisees and really help them, which is going to, on the flip side, drive increased royalties back to you.
Right. Well, I would like to say that I'm seeing that more and more franchisors are really starting to realize this and starting to sort of support their franchisees in these efforts. However, that's not actually what we're seeing, which is unfortunate. And I didn't realize it until we did a bit of a study on our own and collected some data just in the Toronto area. And almost none of the franchisors that we assessed actually had a solid plan in place for the franchise system. And then, to have actually a couple conversations with franchisors that said, we don't really care what the franchisee does. It's up to them. It's their business. I have to admit that my mouth dropped a little bit. I was like, what?
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Because my understanding of why a franchisee would buy into a franchise is because they're buying into a duplicatable system that's proven to work. And if this whole element of online communication is completely absent from that system, then there's a big missing gap that the franchisee has to create for himself or herself. And so it then becomes it's not a duplicatable system.
Well, and I'm even advising people, to look at that kind of thing, because if you're about to buy a system or you're looking at a system and they're not paying attention to social media at this point, you got to think long and hard. It's competitive out there. That. There's and it's, you have to find those differentiating points. You have to find those ways to reach the people, especially as a franchisee. If you're in a brick and mortar type franchise, you have to get in front of those customers. You have to be in front of them consistently with the right message. And if you don't have the support, to me, it's the equivalent of buying a franchise without a marketing plan, right? It's sort of like, it just doesn't make any sense. Well, I really hope that they start coming around. But I think for this show and anybody listening, if you're part of a franchise system or if you're about to be part of a franchise system, make sure you understand how they're tying in social media to their overall marketing. And if they're not, that's a huge red flag at this point.
Right.
Tell me, in the last few minutes that we have, about the workshops and trainings that you offer.
Sure. Well, I travel around to a number of different places. So organizations will bring me in, franchises will bring me to their annual conventions to talk about the importance of the strategy, to lead workshops for the teams. So, and this is from our own clients, but also just franchises that they've really got it together, but they need somebody to come in and kind of inspire them a little bit to get them excited. They've got the system in place. It's just not quite functioning the way it needs to be. So most of the training that we do is just that, organizations see a need and they want somebody to get them excited. So part of the training that we do is very hands-on, and this is actually how you do that. We'll work with franchisees and explain directly, okay, this is how you go on and you like the Facebook page. Simple stuff, right? And then it gets much more complex for organizations that we spend a week training their marketing team in-house to say, okay, these are the tools that are set up for your success. This is how to use them. This is how you would schedule things out. This is how you would make a time management plan, and we help them put all of that in place. Part of the most fun for me, though, is just when I get to speak about the sort of inspirational, fun, passionate side of social media. And I love that. I think, to me, social media is really an extension of who we are as people. And if we use it right, if we use it as an opportunity to really make a difference in the lives of others in a positive way, like, wow, the effects are endless. And that's the stuff that I really like to talk about. And that's what we really strive to do at my company, is help all of our clients achieve some greater goal and make a positive difference using social media.
No, that's a great point. And, it really should be called connection media, right? Because it's all about connecting with people, certainly for business goals, but just in general, it's amazing the opportunities, the unforeseen opportunities that come about by just taking part in the game, right? By just putting yourself out there, by just being involved and connecting with people in a very real way online.
That's right.
So it can really help your business, and it can really help you in many, many ways. And so I love that. I think that I really like what you're doing at Wired Flair. It sounds really, really exciting. Tell people where they can find more information about you and get a hold of you.
Sure. You can find more about Wired Flair at www.wiredflair.com. It's WIREDFLARE.com. And we've got lots of exciting things going on. We've got a new video coming out. Would love for you guys to check that out. And give us a call.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, I'm really excited for what you've got going on. And I love that you're specifically working with franchises as well. I know you're working with other businesses, but I love that you've kind of highlighted that as a sector, because trust me, they need you.
Well, thanks. And franchises have a unique need when it comes to social communications. And for us, we get a lot of satisfaction about helping them create plans that really, truly work for everyone involved.
Well, thanks so much. And I look forward to following your story and possibly, having you on another time for a follow-up interview.
That sounds great, Josh. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Frances.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.